Hello everyone, and welcome to this 11th Learn-chinese.online video. In this video, we are going to see the last 5 Chinese characters from Lesson 2. The Chinese character 对, face to, towards, that we see in the word 对不起, sorry. 对 can be broken down into 2 components. On the left-hand side is the right hand, which is there on the left. We can see below the rather old character, which is very similar. It's just a bit stylized. And on the right-hand side is a thumb. In fact, it's a hand with a small line to indicate the thumb. What is the meaning between the right hand and the thumb to say face to, towards? Well, there isn't, because it's a simplified character. Here is how the traditional character is written, and you see that on the left, instead of having 2 strokes, there are 11 strokes. It is still much more complex. The etymology is quite complex too. The old character, we had the right hand or thumb, it depends on the period, and on the left, we had 2 components. One that was pronounced 主, which meant to grow thick or to have thick vegetation. And below, there was the earth, composed with the right hand. The first meaning of this set of characters will have meant that the work of man allows plants to develop harmoniously. Again, nothing to do with phase 2. Later, the earth element on the left were replaced below by a kind of small circle with a hole. It is the mouth. In fact, this Chinese character subsequently meant to respond to someone occupying a higher rank. The story goes that Emperor Wen would have realized that the praise addressed to him was not sincere, and therefore the mouth would have been replaced by the earth. And this Chinese character would have at that time meant answer respectfully to a superior. It would have kept his sense of talking to a superior. By extension, it meant to be face to face or to face a situation. He kept a bit of this sense of face too. Then, by extension, it also meant that's right. So there, a somewhat complex etymology. The simplified character is, however, quite easy to remember. Now the writing. Look at the animation, then pause the video and try to write this Chinese character on a blank sheet of paper just for fun. Now, I give you the stroke order and you can do the exercise on writing grids as usual. So a relatively simple character to write, made up of 2 elements, quite simple and quite easy to balance. There is not too much difficulty here. This is not the case for the following Chinese character, qi, that we have in 对不起, bu being the negation. You already know how to write it. And so qi means to raise or to initiate action. This is a meaning that may seem a little vague for the moment. It is not a problem. We will focus on the writing. So, how many components do we have in this Chinese character? Well, you could say 2. In fact, we can even say 3. On the right, we have a component that is pronounced E and means already. But originally, we wrote this character si. It is what is called an earthly branch. It is the 6th out of 12. What are earthly branches? In China, there were 12 characters which were called earthly branches and 10 characters of heavenly stems. This made it possible to count and to make calendars following how they were composed. The name of the Chinese year is composed of 2 characters, an earthly branch and the other of heavenly stem. It makes it possible to do a calendar with 60 compositions. I won't go into details because it's quite complex. This Chinese character has evolved a little. It has lost the small part that closes on the left. This is a fairly recent development, but there will still find it in certain fonts. On the left, we have the Chinese character zao, which means to walk or to leave. We will see it later. It can itself be further broken down into two components, above the earth and below the action of walking. What is the etymology of the Chinese character? On the right, we have this famous whirlpool, which is in fact one of the earthly branches. In some writing, some think that we recognize the child as a graphic component. It is important because on the left, we always have the character to walk. At the top, we have a little man who walks. We can see it as if we saw a man in profile running or walking, and below the walking component, which is much more abstract. And so we could have had a child who begins to walk for the first time, which gives the idea of getting up or initiating an action for the first time. So there, indeed, it was much more meaningful. Some people say that in fact it is not the child, but an earthly branch that brought the pronunciation. It doesn't sound the same at all now, but back then it must have sounded different. Then we stylized it a bit, and the current character is often written with the right part that doesn't close. Again, an etymology with a fairly long history. Here is the writing. And the stroke order. And now we can compose the word sorry. 对不起,对不起. And now the Chinese character may, which is the negation of the verb to have. The verb to have is said 有. We will never say 不有, but we will always say 没有. It is a negation that is also used in the past context. We will see that later. We can distinguish three components. On the left-hand side, the component for water, and on the right-hand side is a component that we can further break down into two. At the top is something like the component of the tea table with a slight twist. It doesn't have any hook at the end. Below is yo, the right hand, that we have already seen in the Chinese character 对. What is the etymology of this Chinese character? If we look on the left, we still have water. It represents a river with small whirlpools, and on the right, this famous compound of two elements, which is actually pronounced mo, and meant to take out of the water. Why? In fact, at the top, we have a small whirlpool, which represents a whirlpool of water, and below the hand. It means to catch something that is in the water. In other words, by extension, something that is swallowed up. And subsequently, this Chinese character meant to sink. It was pronounced mo. It is still found in certain expressions, and then the meaning has still drift to mean to hide or to make disappear, sometimes even to die. There we see a little bit of a negation, the fact of disappearing, hiding, or dying. There is still an idea that comes close to the negation. But you can see that the evolution has been quite long and rich. Here is the writing. and the stroke order. The next Chinese character is even simpler. By itself, it means to close. It has two components. At the top is what is called the inverted 8, the number 8 which is written like that. And when you invert it, of course, the size of the stroke changes so that is more aesthetic. Underneath, we have a Chinese character which is a word pronounced tian and means sky or day. The original meaning is sky. What is the relationship between inverted 8, sky, and to close? Well, there isn't, because again it's a simplified character. Let's see the etymology of traditional writing. Here is a traditional character. The ancient writing is composed of the door and below two rings with a bar. It was the ring in which we put the bar to close the door. We see that the character on the left is a little more abstract than the one on the right. It's an ideogram that nevertheless represents the idea of closing quite well. You see that there we have a strong simplification of the character. The traditional character is really very different. It's not just a component that has been simplified, but the whole character. It is more difficult to remember non-simplified character when the whole character has been changed and not just a component of the character. Its writing is quite simple, from top to bottom, and from left to right, always the same. It is also quite easy to balance in a square. And now, the stroke order. The last Chinese character, xi, which means to bind or to join. In the word guanxi, it loses its tone. When he is alone, it can also be pronounced ji. It then means to attach, to fasten. For the moment, we will see its components. At the top, we just have a downward line to the left. In the middle, we have the element of silk or tiny, and below, an element which is also a character and a word, to be small. Let's now see its etymology. In fact, the old character was written like that. Like many Chinese characters, ancient writing could have many variants. I took a fairly representative one. It represents a qipu. Do you know what a qipu is? If, like me, when you were young, you saw the famous cartoon series, The Mysterious Cities of Gold, well, you know what it is. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch it. A qipu is made up of cords of different lengths that were tied together. Knots were tied in certain places to signify digits, numbers, or even messages. It is a fairly simple form of language. Qipu may therefore have existed in ancient China, because they are found in the character. On the left, the character is quite complicated. After it was simplified, we can see the rope and the small knots. The writing now, from top to bottom. The component to be small is a symmetrical character. Let's see it. We first write the vertical line in the middle, then the stroke on the left, and then on the right. This Chinese character is not very complicated to write, but we always tend to make it too long vertically, so we must try to crush it a little. We can now write the word guanxi. As I said in previous video, the C loses its tone in the word guanxi. We do not say guanxi, but guanxi. It means relationship, especially professional relationships. We talk a lot about guanxi in China. It is a very important word. And here is the word of the lesson, 没关系. It doesn't matter. Literally, there is no connection. This video is now over. Thank you for watching it to the end. Remember to like, comment and share. In the next video, we will see the traditional Chinese characters from Lesson 2. See you there.